Today is May 20th, 2021. My name is Andy Z. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California, and this is episode number 53 of the RNL Revolution, Nothing Less show. And we mean it. Look around the world and think about the future of literally billions of people. And then think about how those who rule today are quite literally destroying the lives and the earth we live on. How spirits everywhere are downpressed and crushed within the confines of a system that sets everyone, every group, against each other and ultimately against all of us. Look too at the politicians, these bourgeois and wannabe bourgeois leaders who have no real answers. No answers that even begin to seriously address the massive inequality between peoples, genders, countries, wealth, people's access to clean air, water, and food, and healthcare and sanitation, to any and all of the problems that humanity faces, and all the suffering that goes on and on unabated. This week we've had our consciences seared by the bloody reality of this imperialist system starkly revealed in the genocide against the Palestinian people, backed up by bombs and support from the United States. Everywhere, leaders of this system, even those who stand against the outright fascists who want to obliterate the rule of law, only consistently offer more oppression and repression against those sections of the people for whom they have no future, and all who oppose them. Honeyed words of inclusion, diversity, and multilateralism cannot obscure this deadly reality. We need a revolution, a real revolution. Every week on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, we bring you nothing less than a real revolution. Every week, we bring to you a totally different kind of leader. A leader who has devoted his life to working on how we could really make a revolution here and around the world, and how that revolution could birth a radically different and far better society. That leader is Bob Avakian, B.A. Bob Avakian has further developed the scientific approach to knowing and changing the world. This is a method and approach that enables masses of people to understand why, in this world, in the actual reality we live and confront, all the oppression and exploitation keeps going on and on and on, from police brutally murdering and oppressing people, to the wars of occupation and conquest such as we're seeing in Palestine, to women being brutalized and refugees fleeing places devastated by this system. Bob Avakian roots us in the problem humanity faces, a system which has a name, capitalism, imperialism. On this scientific basis, he has further developed the solution, an actual revolution to overthrow this system and bring into being a genuinely socialist republic that would be a radically different and far better society that would put humanity on the road to real emancipation. Bob Avakian has developed a comprehensive and consistent method and approach so that millions of people can together know and change the world. This is at the core of what we bring to you on this show every week from Bob Avakian. The scientific understanding that the system must be finally overthrown through an organized struggle involving millions of people and replaced with a system that is oriented to and capable of meeting the most fundamental needs of humanity and enabling humanity to become fit caretakers of the earth. This is the new communism that BA has brought forth. This moment, this time in history is one where all of us need to go to work to awaken and to organize thousands into the revolution impacting millions. We have entered a time when revolution could be possible, a time when the situation that is present in this country could be ripened into a situation where revolution could really be possible. But that depends on us getting busy, getting organized, and following the leadership we have in BA that we are very fortunate to have at this time. To this, we dedicate the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. The last 2 weeks, the world has witnessed in heart-rending and infuriating scenes the outrage of the continued genocide of the Palestinian people. Our third segment in today's program will dig into the roots of this struggle, how we should understand it, and how we get to a different world. As a declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution sharply puts it, quote, "For the masses of people and ultimately for humanity as a whole, there is no future or no future worth living under this system, end quote. A potentially positive sign for the struggle for a radically new world is the broader identification between the struggle of the Palestinian people and the struggle here against the racist police murders and white supremacy. A Palestinian reporter living in Israel wrote in The Guardian of the struggle of the Palestinian people that, quote, what we are in the streets protesting about now is not one killing or one violent raid, but a whole regime of oppression that destroys our bodies, our homes, our communities, our hopes. Just as the protests for Black lives spread across the U.S. last year were not only about George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or any one killing, end quote. And there are also viewpoints and approaches to these struggles that lead away from liberation, and we're going to get into that too in our third segment. With this commonality of the struggle against oppression as a segue, our second segment today will be a new installment of our series, Bob Avakian for the Liberation of Black People and the Emancipation of All Humanity. We begin our show today by digging further into a declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution. This is a momentous document. Note well the word now. Get organized now. This isn't a marketing slogan. Now is not hype. Get organized for a real revolution now reflects a profound, a serious scientific analysis that runs through and undergirds the urgency of the whole declaration and call. It says, this is one of those rare times and circumstances when revolution becomes possible. Not just because this system is always a horror, but because the crisis and deep divisions in society now can only be resolved through radical means of one kind or another, either radically reactionary, murderously oppressive and destructive means, or radically emancipating, revolutionary means. For the positive, emancipatory means, for the revolutionary means to be realized, we need to understand that this is based not on what we wish to be true, but on the real living contradictions this system faces. This system and those who rule are unable to solve the most pressing problems of people here and around the world, problems that millions of people want to see solved. The deep crisis of the capitalist imperialist system is now sharply concentrated among those who rule, between the Republican fascists on the one hand and the Democrats on the other. Coming from very different points of view, both of these ruling parties see the continued survival of their oppressive and repressive capitalist imperialist system at stake. In part 2 of the short version of the declaration, it says that these rulers, quote, cannot hold things together in the way they have in the past. Although there are a lot of bad things connected with this, and it could lead to something really terrible, it is also possible that we could wrench something really positive out of it, revolution. For that to happen, the declaration says we have to get busy, build a movement and organize forces for revolution all over the country, and work together tirelessly for this revolution, to actively prepare for the situation where this system can be brought down and something much better brought into being. The declaration provides the orientation and a basic guideline for what we need to do now. In the last episode of the RNL Show and in the episode before, we went deeply into part 4 of the short version of the declaration on what we have to do. And I gave special emphasis to this passage. Organizing people into this revolution means reaching out to all sorts of people everywhere throughout society, spreading the word about revolution and getting people together in real life and online to, quote, grapple with why an actual revolution is necessary, what such a revolution involves, and what kind of society this is aiming for. It goes on to say this will enable people who are new to the revolution to themselves become organizers for this revolution and to recruit more and more people to do the same. On this basis, and through the growing ranks of the revolution acting together as an increasingly powerful force, it will be possible to attract and organize the necessary numbers and build up the necessary strength to be in the position to do what needs to be done. In taking this out, some people have asked, so what's the plan? Well, right there in the paragraph I just read is a key part of the plan to get started. Getting into the substance of why revolution is necessary and possible, what it's all about, and what we are aiming for, and in doing so continuously reaching and recruiting and organizing people into the revolution, is making a start. At the same time, and as part of this, we need to act together to impact and influence millions to be favorable to this revolution. At the same time, when people ask, what's the plan? They are also responding to the declaration calling straight up for getting organized now for an actual revolution as something they have never thought of. And for others, this has provoked a questioning or a feeling that this couldn't really be possible in this country. The enemy is too powerful and the people too messed up, disorganized, and disunited. Bob Avakian says this.
It is also true that the ruling powers of this system, with the machinery of death and destruction they wield to enforce this system, are indeed very powerful. But a big part of people's difficulty in imagining that we could actually defeat them is the inability to conceive of a situation that is radically different than the normal functioning of this system. A situation where, for large parts of society, the hold of the ruling class over people, its ability to control, manipulate, and intimidate them is broken or greatly weakened. Fundamentally, people cannot imagine this because they are not approaching things with a scientific outlook and method. As How We Can Win emphasizes, to make this revolution, we need to be serious and scientific.
There is an incredible analysis of why we need a revolution, the strategy for how it could really be made, and what it's all for in the film of the talk Bob Avakian gave in 2018, Why We Need an Actual Revolution, How We Could Really Make Revolution, which is where the short excerpt we just saw comes from. Everyone who is sick of what this system does to people, here and around the world, and everyone who aspires to a far better world needs to see this film. It is a primer for all of those who want to work for a real revolution. This weekend in Los Angeles, we are going to show the film on Saturday and Sunday with an intermission and a discussion afterwards. And on Sunday, the film will be shown at Revolution Books in Harlem, New York. And we will be showing the film online this Sunday at 3:30 Pacific Time, 5:30 Central Time, and 6:30 Eastern Time, followed by an online discussion. Go to revcom.us for the exact times and how to access this and the locations of the in-person showings. Watching this film together is a crucial step in getting into the three questions that I have been emphasizing. To give you a taste of what you will see, we're going to play an excerpt from the film that gives you a sense of what Bob Avakian brings in this talk. His revolutionary passion, his strategic contempt for those who rule this system and those who front for it, and his belief that the masses of people can take this revolution up and transform the world.
It has been raised that when How We Can Win insists that the authority people look to cannot be those who turn people against each other when they need to be uniting for this revolution. It is talking about gangs, among others. Well, in making this revolution, we are not going out to make an enemy out of the gangs. We are working to win people to revolution and to build up the forces for this revolution, in line with what is concentrated in the points of attention for the revolution, to put an end to everything that enslaves and degrades people, including all the conditions that have led to the creation of gangs in the first place, and the situation where so many of our youth are fighting and killing each other. And let everyone decide where they stand in relation to this revolution that we are working for. But we need to struggle hard against the way of thinking that says it's everybody for themselves and you got to do what you got to do to get over on everybody else and get big bank and have lots of property, including turning women into property. All of this is just an imitation of the outlook of the oppressor, and it is a big part of what has kept masses of people oppressed and degraded for so long. Once again, all played out calls this shit out. I got my mind on my money and my money on my mind. That craziness about being like Scarface, acting without a trace of humanity, plundering and violating without remorse, killing and dying for no good purpose. Give it up, it's all played out. In thinking about people who have gotten into the life, often from a very early age, I'm reminded of the lines in a song from back in the day by the R&B group The Whispers. Seems like I gotta do wrong, gotta do wrong, gotta do wrong before they notice me. Well, fuck they. To invoke a statement by Frederick Douglass from the days of slavery that very well captures the truth today, they are guilty of crimes that would disgrace a nation of savages. For revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. All this relates to what I said in an appeal to those the system has cast off. Raise your sights above the degradation and madness, above the individual battle to survive and to be somebody on the terms of the imperialists, of fouler, more monstrous criminals than mythology has ever invented or jails ever held. Become a part of the human saviors of humanity, the grave diggers of this system, and the bearers of the future communist society. In opposition to those who mislead the people, the authority of the revolution and its leadership can be extended and strengthened as it brings to light through scientific analysis what is really going on in all the major events in society and the world, and where the fundamental interests of the masses of humanity actually lie, and as it mobilizes increasing numbers of people to fight for those fundamental interests. But building up this revolutionary authority will not happen automatically. It too must be consistently worked for and vigorously fought for as a concrete goal, an important part of carrying out the three prepares. You go out and you talk to people about revolution, and they say they don't want to hear that. You tell them to quit opening their mouth and letting the oppressor come out of it. This basic guideline is set forth in how we can win. We need to approach everything, evaluate every political program and every organized force in society, every kind of culture, values, and ways of treating people according to how it relates to the revolution we need. A revolution to do what? To end all oppression. Here again is the importance of the points of attention for the revolution, and winning more and more people to uphold, live by, and fight for this in building the revolution we need to end all oppression. We need to combine a firmness of principle and unwavering grip on the strategic goal of revolution with a broadness of mind and generosity of spirit. We need to work with many different kinds of people in building resistance against the crimes of the system, while keeping our eye clearly on the prize of revolution and struggling in a good way to win people from all parts of society to active involvement in, positive support for, or at least friendly neutrality towards this revolution. How we can win puts it in basic terms. We should unite with people whenever we can and struggle with them whenever we need to advance the revolution. And it gives a sense of the breadth of people that should be involved in this revolution. People in the inner cities and in the prisons, students, scholars, artists, lawyers, and other professionals, youth in the suburbs and rural areas, people in all parts of society need to know about this and seriously take it up.
I want to give you an overview of the whole film, so let's watch now the promotional trailer for the film.
Why we need an actual revolution and how we can really make revolution. How many more times do the tears and the cries of anguish and anger have to pour forth from the wounded hearts of people? White supremacy, male supremacy, wars of empire, the demonization, criminalization, and deportations of immigrants, the destruction of the planet. Why is this the state of humanity? There is one fundamental reason. The basic nature of the system of capitalism, imperialism that we live under, and the way, because of its very nature, it continually perpetrates and perpetuates horror after horror. And in fundamental terms, we have two choices. Either live with all this and condemn future generations to the same, or worse, if they have a future at all, or make revolution. An actual revolution does not mean trying to make some changes within this system. It means overthrowing this system and bringing into being a radically different and far better system. A revolution aiming not just to abolish oppression, exploitation, poverty, and misery in one country, but having as its fundamental goal the abolition of all this throughout the world, and the elimination of all borders and boundaries that erect walls between the different parts of humanity. Let's be honest, this is a difficult road, but there is no other way to finally put an end to the horrors that are continually brought forth by this system. And as hard as this is, it is possible if we go about it the right way, with the right outlook and approach, the right goals and methods, the right strategy and plan. So this is what I'm going to dig into through the course of this talk. Revolution is possible, and we have to go to work to make it real.
So make a plan now to watch and discuss why we need an actual revolution and how we could really make a revolution together with us on this weekend. A crucial part of attracting and then organizing the forces for revolution involves not only spreading the word of BA and the revolution, but also involves acting together to put the revolution before society, aiming to impact millions now to know about and become favorable to the revolution. The declaration says, quote, "We need to struggle hard with people to take up the orientation and strategy, the values and goals for this revolution, and dedicate themselves to working for this revolution. While we unite growing numbers to fight the abuse, brutality, and destruction perpetrated by the system, and through all this, get thousands and then millions of people prepared and steeled to do away with this system that brings so much hell to the people." There is a plan for this, and to conclude this segment on the Declaration, we are announcing a call to all who want a better world. June 12th, 2021, March. Show the world that we are getting organized now for revolution, nothing less. In Los Angeles, this march is going straight to a hated enforcer of the brutal oppression of this system, a station of the LA County Sheriffs in South Central Los Angeles. Just last year, the RevComs took part in protests at this same station against the wanted murder of Dejan Kizzy, a 29-year-old black man who was riding his bicycle. 15 shots to the back. This is a march to announce to the world that we are getting organized. We are marching with discipline. We are going to show the world that this system must be gone if humanity is to get free. We are going to show the world that there is a growing revolutionary force standing up to this system and its murderous enforcers. People see this and say, who are those people? This is part of changing the whole terrain, the political, the social, and the cultural situation, and the atmosphere throughout all of society. Taking to the streets in this way on June 12th, we announce that we have the leadership in BA, that we have the strategy to make a revolution. We are not begging or pleading. We are standing up and calling on everyone who wants to see an end to oppression and injustice. Everyone who has a heart to fight for something really worth fighting for. Join us. Show the world that we are getting organized now for revolution, nothing less.
We want to bring to you now segment 5 of an important article that we've been illustrating here at the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show over the last several weeks. It's called Bob Avakian, For the Liberation of Black People and the Emancipation of All Humanity. This piece brings alive a really critical dimension of who Bob Avakian is as a person and a leader, and the work that he's done on this fault line question that's bound up with the emancipation of all humanity. To set us up, I want to read from the opening of this piece. It says, one of the things that comes through most powerfully in Bob Avakian's memoir is that a profound hatred for the oppression of Black people has been a defining part of Bob Avakian's life from the time, as a teenager, he learned about the lives of Black people with whom he developed deep ties of friendship. Never feeling that because he is white, it is not his place to be involved in the struggle against this oppression, but on the contrary, determined to contribute whatever he could to this struggle. Bob Avakian, B.A., from the time he worked closely with the Black Panther Party in its revolutionary days in the 1960s, has made the liberation of Black people a defining part of his life's commitment and work. As he developed as a revolutionary communist and emerged as the foremost revolutionary leader and thinker in the world, this commitment has become even deeper and has been strongly interwoven with a dedication to the emancipation of all humanity from every form of oppression and exploitation. And how this is so in the development of BA's life and work on this question is brought alive in this piece and in the series that we've done so far leading up to the installment we're bringing you today. Today in part 5, we're going to go into the work that BA has done on this question and the emancipation of humanity, some of the work that he's done on this. So let's take a look.
Bob Avakian, For the Liberation of Black People and the Emancipation of All Humanity. In the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America, authored by BA, a sweeping vision and a concrete blueprint for that radically different and much better system is set forth. And the principles and means for finally putting an end, at long last, to the oppression of Black people is a major part of that Constitution. This year, 2020, BA has written as many as 30 articles in which this decisive question, the oppression and the struggle for the liberation of Black people, is a recurring subject.
Why is this terror and murder necessary for this system in order to ensure its order and its ongoing functioning? The answer is that from the beginning of this country, white supremacy has been poured into the foundation and built into the institutions and the ongoing functioning of this system. Specifically with regard to Black people, the centuries of oppression they have suffered, from slavery days to the days of Jim Crow segregation and Ku Klux Klan terror, to the present time with the continuing systematic discrimination against Black people in every part of society, employment, housing, education, healthcare, and on and on. All this has resulted in a situation where masses of Black people today, and in particular youth, have been robbed of a means for a decent life, with many maintained in conditions of desperate poverty and deprivation.
In the speeches and writings of B.A. overall, there is not only powerful, penetrating exposure and uncompromising condemnation of brutal and murderous oppression, but, even more importantly, there is scientific analysis of how all this is rooted in this system of capitalism imperialism, and of the need, the possibility, and the means for making revolution to overthrow this system and finally put an end to all the outrageous and unnecessary suffering that the masses of humanity are continually subjected to under this system.
White supremacy and capitalism. They have been completely interwoven and tightly stitched together through the whole development of this country down to today. To attempt to really put an end to white supremacy while maintaining the system of capitalism would tear the entire fabric of the country apart. White supremacy and capitalism. It is not possible to overcome and finally abolish the one without overthrowing and finally abolishing the other.
It is a very precious thing for the oppressed of the earth when they have a leader whose life is dedicated to their emancipation and who has the determination and the scientific method developed over decades to point the way and continue to carve out the path to achieving that emancipation. B.A. is such a leader.
200 of us volunteered to go to D.C. to turn it upside down politically, to defend Bob Avakian, the Mao Zedong defenders. And I had we had a talk, he just came up and he approached me. Here he is, he's a world-class leader. He just came up and approached me, and he started talking to me about some of the things that we were studying at that time, which we were studying about how the second Communist International, how it collapsed in the face of big challenges, which was World War I at that time. And it was only Lenin who led, the masses, to fight in the interest of humanity and stuff, and to make revolution, while everybody else leading they gave up on revolution and led the masses, in the different countries to fight each other in defense of the fucking imperialist fatherland and shit like this here. And he was just talking to me about that and some of the lessons that we should draw and stuff like that. But he was so genuine, so down to earth. And we was just talking. It was like when you're talking to him, it was like talking to your best friend. That's what always struck me about B.A., that struck me whenever I've, engaged him and stuff, whether that was through writing or whether that's through talking to him directly and stuff. That's what's always struck me. And the other thing that's always struck me about B.A. is getting, always getting to the heart, getting to the root of what the problem is. And that's the only way you can get to what the real solution is. You got to get to the heart. You got to get to the root of where it all stems from and stuff. And he's developed a method and approach that enables him and it enables you, enables everybody else who take that up to be able to do that and stuff. So we can bring about the revolution to emancipate humanity.
As emphasized in the article, Bob Avakian, a radically different leader, a whole new framework for human emancipation. As a revolutionary leader, BA also embodies this rare combination: someone who has been able to develop scientific theory on a world-class level, while at the same time having a deep understanding of and visceral connection with the most oppressed, and a highly developed ability to break down complex theory and make it broadly accessible.
If you want to eliminate a problem or an evil, you must get to the root of it. If you want to eliminate the oppression and miserable conditions of the masses of people in the world today, you have to dig down to the underlying foundation, the ground in which this oppression and misery is rooted, and which continually gives rise to this oppression and suffering. You cannot get rid of a poisonous plant and create something healthy in its place just by pulling up the top of the plant. You have to pull it up from the roots and then grow something completely different and change the soil too. That is what a radical solution is. Radical means having to do with the root. And this is why a real revolution is needed, and this is what it's all about.
We begin with a new wave of Israeli attacks.
Dozens of Israeli airstrikes.
The deadliest day so far. Israeli forces continue to hammer Gaza, including children.
6-year-old Susie is pulled from the rubble.
The United States has Israel's back.
Israel has a right to exist and to defend itself. That is an indisputable fact.
9 Gazans have been killed, including 3 children.
Israel has the right to defend itself.
More than 300 Palestinians were injured at the Al-Aqsa Mosque,
bringing the Palestinian death toll to at least 231, including 65 children.
Israel has a right to defend itself.
Hold up. What does confining 2 million people in a tiny bit of land in the Gaza Strip, like an open-air prison, cutting off medicine, food, electricity, water, sanitation, and repeatedly bombing civilians, killing huge numbers of children, what does all this have to do with Israel defending itself? What does gobbling up more and more land, invading and stealing homes of Palestinians have to do with Israel defending itself? This is not some age-old conflict that no one can understand. These are not clashes between two sides that just can't get along. This is about oppressors and oppressed, right and wrong. So what is the real nature of the state of Israel? Why does every US president back Israel, whether it's Republican fascists like Donald Trump or Democrats like Obama and Biden? Does the Holocaust justify the crimes Israel is committing against Palestinians? And what will it take for Palestinians and all of humanity to finally get free? To answer these questions, let's pull back the lens and look at how all this started.
Israel, a colonial project since the beginning. For many centuries, Jews in Europe were persecuted, discriminated against, and targeted by murderous pogroms, outbreaks of mob violence, similar to white racist lynch mobs in the United States. This culminated in the Holocaust, the systematic extermination of 6 million Jewish people by Hitler and the Nazis in World War II. Britain, the US, and other capitalist imperialist powers did little to stop this crime. In fact, the United States turned back a ship of Jewish refugees, sending most of them to their deaths. But Britain did support the founding of Israel as a Jewish state, and the United States recognized the state of Israel on its very first day of existence. And since 1967 down to today, the United States has been Israel's biggest backer. Why? Because they wanted a loyal colonial outpost to serve their interests in the Middle East. This wasn't hidden. The main founder of the Zionist movement for a Jewish state, Theodor Herzl, openly appealed to the European powers on this basis. He said, quote, "I must believe that here in England, the idea of Zionism, which is a colonial idea, should be easily and quickly understood in its true and most modern form." End quote. The Zionists insisted that Palestine was a land without a people, for a people without a land. There was just one problem. The Palestinian people were already there.
Israel, a country founded on terrorist ethnic cleansing. Imagine a whole people being violently forced from their homes and herded into smaller and smaller areas of land. Sound familiar? This is exactly like what the Zionists did to the Palestinians. From 1947 to 1949, the Zionists unleashed a wave of terrorist violence and mass expulsions of Palestinians. This is known to the Palestinians as the Nakba, from the Arabic word for catastrophe. During the Nakba, almost 1 million Palestinians were forced from their land, villages, and homes, fleeing with only the possessions they could carry. Many were raped, tortured, and killed. The Nakba included at least 31 massacres and destroyed about 500 villages. This was the conscious plan of Zionist leaders like David Ben-Gurion, who became Israel's first prime minister. According to an associate, he ordered, quote, "Every attack has to end with occupation, destruction, and expulsion." This is how the state of Israel was built. Jewish settlers breaking into and stealing Palestinian homes. New Jewish towns built on the ashes of Palestinian villages. This is genocide, and it is not ancient history. It frames the daily life of every Palestinian today. And Zionist settlers continuing to steal Palestinian homes is at the heart of what sparked the uprising of Palestinians we are seeing now.
Jacob, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
it's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, يا عمي.
شلوم عم التخريم شلوم ليه التخريم ده يا ابوي عم التخريم شلوم سومي يا باي سومي يا يوسف نص لخير سومي يا باي
In the same way that last summer's massive protests and rebellions across the United States and then around the world were not only about the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but about generations of police terror and systemic white supremacy, so too the current outpourings of righteous protest and rebellion among Palestinians and those who stand with them, from Gaza and the West Bank to the streets of Israel itself and all around the world, is not just about one violent raid or one recent eviction, but against generations of genocidal displacement, massacres, terror, and oppression.
It is very important that growing numbers of people are making connections between these struggles, and there is little the rulers of this system fear more than oppressed people coming to understand their common cause and their common enemy. And there is little they would like better than to pit oppressed people against each other. The ruling classes in Europe used anti-Semitism, the hatred of Jewish people, in this way for hundreds of years to misdirect the anger of the masses. And anti-Semitic poison and conspiracy theories continue to be spread by rulers and wannabe rulers, infecting the minds of way too many people. From the chants of white supremacists in Charlottesville that Jews will not replace us,
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
to the vile lies about Jews spewing out of the mouth of Louis Farrakhan.
The satanic Jews that control everything and mostly everybody. I'm talking about the wicked ones in the Jewish community that run America, run the government, run the world, own the banks, own the means of communication. They are my enemies.
To the anti-Semitic views of some people who oppose Israel but direct their anger at Jews rather than at the Zionist system.
يجب أن نهجم على كل يهودي متواجد في الكرة الأرضية ذبحا وقتلا بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى.
And for Jewish people, there is the horrible irony that some survivors of the Nazi Holocaust became perpetrators of genocide against others. Here, the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian speaks to this experience, drawing profound lessons for all oppressed people everywhere, including those righteously rising up now in Palestine and beyond.
And there's a very important example, negatively, that we should all learn from in the state of Israel. The experience of Jewish people throughout centuries in Europe and other places of being bitterly discriminated against and viciously persecuted for centuries. And then under the rule of the Nazis during the time of World War II, being literally exterminated with 6 million annihilated by the Nazis, certainly ranks at the very top in the whole history of crimes against humanity. But in response to this, among Jewish people, including those who survived that Holocaust, there have been two different and opposite responses. One is never again. Never again must this happen to any people anywhere. But the other is because of what has been done to our people, anything we do from now on is justified. And so you find them founding the state of Israel on the basis of bloodthirsty ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people who live there, which is now reaching genocidal proportions. No. Our answer has to be the first. Never again shall this happen to any people, anywhere. We need to move to a world beyond all that.
There is a way to get to a world beyond all that, beyond all oppression and exploitation, beyond all antagonistic divisions between people. Bob Avakian, the leader you just heard, has over many decades developed a new communism, a more scientific way to understand the root of the problems we face, the strategy for an actual revolution, the vision for a radically new society and world on the road to real emancipation, and more, including a complete break with the poisonous notion that the ends justify the means. This new communism is the complete opposite of all this idiotic and dangerous identity politics and just looking out for me and my group and going for revenge. The logical conclusion of identity politics when it comes to power under this system of capitalism imperialism is what you see today in the state of Israel. No, this new communism is really about getting to a world where all this oppression really is never again, in every form.
Israel's crimes made in the USA. Why has every U.S. president since 1967 backed Israel?
Israel.
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 Israel. Israel.
After World War II, the U.S. became the dominant imperialist power in the world and moved to control the Middle East. By then, Israel had become a major military power, the only nuclear-armed country in the Middle East. The U.S. ruling class took note and began to build a special relationship with Israel, giving it billions of dollars in military aid and other economic assistance every year, way more than any other country. In exchange, Israel acts as an enforcer for U.S. imperialist interests in the Middle East and beyond. Listen to what Joe Biden said about this in 1986.
Look at the Middle East. I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
This is not about the Jewish lobby buying off U.S. politicians. It's about the essential role that Israel plays for U.S. imperialism in the Middle East and doing its dirty work all over the world. Think about this. Israel has backed death squads in Guatemala, trained torturers in Iran, supplied arms to Argentinian fascists and apartheid South Africa. What does this have to do with Israel's claim that it is protecting and defending the Jewish people? Absolutely nothing. But Israel's support for these reactionary and fascist forces around the world was of great use to the imperialist United States. It helped crush forces who were challenging U.S. interests while enabling the U.S. to keep much of the blood off its hands directly. And let's be clear, there is no way Israel could slaughter children for decades, attack neighboring countries, and build a 21st century apartheid state without the military, economic, and political support it gets from the U.S.
Where will all this go? Humanity needs revolution and the new communism. A new generation is rising up heroically in the West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Jordan, right inside Israel, and all over the world. Will this get beaten down or even annihilated by the US-backed genocidal apartheid state of Israel? Will this be misdirected and suffocated by Islamic fundamentalist forces with their narrow view of revenge, ignorance, patriarchy, and enslavement that only adds to the horrors suffered by Palestinians and others? Or will this uprising be part of bringing forward another way for humanity? This is a dividing line moment. For those living in the United States, the belly of the beast that enables Israel, there is an urgent challenge to oppose Israel's crimes and stand with the just struggle for national liberation of the Palestinian people. And for people everywhere, the new synthesis of communism and the path forward through real revolution to a world without wars for empire, armies of occupation, and crimes against humanity perpetrated by this system and its enforcers and allies around the world really does need to be fought for and taken up broadly in this society and in the world as a whole. As Bob Avakian writes in his book, The New Communism, this needs to be taken up everywhere people are questioning why things are the way they are and whether a different world is possible. Everywhere people are talking about revolution, but have no understanding of what revolution means, no scientific approach to analyzing and dealing with what they are up against and what needs to be done. Everywhere people are rising up in rebellion, but are hemmed in, let down, and left to the mercy of murderous oppressors or misled onto paths which only reinforce, often with barbaric brutality, the enslaving chains of tradition. Everywhere people need a way out of their desperate conditions, but do not see the source of their suffering and the path forward out of the darkness.
Stop U.S. imperialist support for Israel. Stop Israeli genocidal attacks on Palestinians.
Okay, so this brings us to the close of episode number 53 of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show on May 20th, 2021. And as promised, Ansara Taylor, you were indeed back this week.
I am back. I mean, I'm very happy to be back with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the segment that you and Raphael did on Palestine was very good, really important for people to watch.
Good. Well, I hope that people take it and they spread it and actually spread this whole episode. Let your friends know about it. We have to grow this revolution right now. You know, this is a time to put our foot on the accelerator. And I just want to underscore, coming out this weekend in New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, or logging in online and joining in a collective viewing of this film from Bob Avakian, Why We Need an Actual Revolution and How We Could Really Make Revolution, and then wrangling with it. This is part of getting organized now, so we could wrench a bright future out of a very dangerous time.
Yeah, and I want to see everybody come out for June 12th. This is really a chance to show the world that we are getting organized now for revolution, nothing less. And so, look, with that, it's been a packed show. Spread it everywhere, and we'll see you next week.